Hey everyone, this is Sean Paulseth, Head of Partnerships here at Wedge. And today is a very special day. This is when we're kickstarting our inaugural webinar TV series here at Wedge, aka WedgeChatter. Now, the purpose for these chats is really to dig in on current topics and challenges within the HR and talent landscape, and really bringing in a perspective both from multiple different lenses. So whether that is from a technology standpoint, a leadership standpoint, but also things like a practitioner and people on the front line to really get multiple different perspectives and how they intertwine to really impact these challenges and overcome them in today's world. Now, today we have two very special leaders, both on the technology side, but also the practitioner side. Donna Saunders, who is Head of Business Development at HiringThing, which is a very close partner of ours here at Wedge, but also Mark Weaver, who is the owner and operator of Open Door Culture, that allows you to both engage and identify top talent faster, but also talent that aligns with the mission, the value, and ultimately the culture. Now, I'll let Donna and Mark introduce themselves here, but first and foremost, thank you for being online with us here at WedgeChatter. We're super excited to dive in and dig in on the topic today.
Go ahead, Donna.
Well, as Sean mentioned, I am in business development here at HiringThing. I have, however, been in the tech field for hiring for about 10 years. So I have seen the tech come up from nothing to do all kinds of amazing things within hiring. And I'm very excited to be talking about the subject that we are today.
Thank you, Donna.
And as Sean mentioned, my company's Open Door. I largely work with companies on culture, team, and leadership. And then sometimes I have clients that want help finding people that fit that culture, team, and leadership wants to find. And so I'm not really a headhunter at all. I'm really a culture person, but I see the value of finding people that are aligned with that culture.
Thank you, Mark. And I think that's a great segue into our topic today, is really how people are hiring for culture add, but also cultural fit in today's labor market. Obviously, the past couple of years have been crazy in terms of hiring, and how can companies maintain and continue to hire for things like cultural add. Now, there's been a lot of research behind kind of the philosophy shift from cultural fit to cultural add. And I would love to get your 2 cents on how organizations can prioritize culture, but also add to their culture in today's labor market and quote unquote, the great resignation, for lack of a better analogy. But we'd love to get your 2 cents on that first. Donna, if you want to go ahead, that would be awesome.
Sure. I think probably the most important thing would be to define the two. So we've had a big shift in that as far as what is cultural fit and what does cultural add mean. So cultural fit has pretty much been defined in the past of bringing someone on to an already based culture that a company has created. A lot of times that was just something that senior management felt they wanted employees to come on board and be like-minded or like individuals. And what we found with that is that it's more created a bias, because what a cultural add is adding somebody that is completely different or unique, may have different perspectives, different backgrounds, not only in being diverse, but just adding something new to the team. So that is, I think knowing that definition is very important. I know in my experience, it's definitely been something I've seen a lot that I can speak on, but I think defining it is probably the number one thing we need to do.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very good point, Donna. That actually led me to the next kind of area in terms of perpetuating bias. But Mark, would love to hear what you and the organization are doing at Open Door in terms on focusing on that kind of the cultural fit, but also the cultural add piece as well.
Sure. I might see that a little bit differently because to me, there's a very distinct difference between culture, meaning values, norms, shared history, shared vision, and personality. And so background, personality, hobbies, politics, all kind of other things are not what I mean by culture. What I'm talking about is, as a team, what do you want to be like? What direction you want to be rowing in, both from a vision, but also the way that you get there. And so, just as an easy one to pick on, I'll talk about pace. So let's say that you have a controller who is more of a deliberate, patient kind of person who wants to take time to make the right kind of decisions, but that individual doesn't actually want to be part of a culture that is like that. They want to be the counterbalance to a fast-growing sales kind of organization where they can bring some of the stability to the table, but that's what energizes them. Might not be their personality at all, but it might be the place that is more like aligned with their values in terms of what they actually want, the pace that they want to work at, or whatever that may be. And so I think you can find people of any background, age, ethnicity, gender, whatever way you want to slice populations up, that are still aligned in values, even though background and experience and perspectives and worldview and hobbies and all kind of other things can be very different. I don't think personality is quite the same. So in my way of thinking, being clear what the organization is like in terms of values is something that most organizations fail at. And when they do, people think generically like, oh, we're going to be an employer of choice. And I interpret what I mean by that. You interpret what you mean by that. And chances are nobody's really happy because we don't really know what the culture is.
So it sounds like an important starting point is always trying to figure out what that culture means. So what those values actually are, and then starting to really replicate that within the hiring process, which I think is 100% true. But I think on Donna's side, the creating a definition between the cultural add and cultural fit is crucial too, because there's definitely different definitions behind that. And then I think in today's labor market, trying to find talent is obviously harder than ever. So in terms of talent attraction, I'd love to get both your 2 cents on how organizations can attract and how you can convey culture through the hiring process while you're out there looking for talent, which is obviously super important. And while you're trying to fill seats, how can you maintain that culture and make sure that aligns with your mission, your value that you had set up and maintained and kind of defined before that process too? Because I think talent attraction and sourcing is of top of mind, but also focusing things like culture add, how you can intertwine that throughout that process. Would love to get your kind of opinion on that as well, Donna and Mark.
Mark, you want to take that one first?
Sure. First of all, as I said, I think you have to do a real good job of defining culture. And I don't mean just the conventional mission, vision, values that looks like a consultant or, whoever you might hire to wordsmith those kind of things. I really mean the ways. So I break it down quite a bit further than that part. That might be the middle, but I start before that and take it further. But I want to hear an organization define what I like to think of as norms, but also intolerables, which is probably me pluralizing a nounized adjective, I guess is a good way to put it. But what works, what doesn't work, because the clearer that you make that and the better job you do at reinforcing it, the easier it is to get a team aligned. It's interesting with the Great Resignation, and I'm just looking over another screen, but there have been some surveys done of people who left organizations, and I'm sure you've seen some of those, but some of them are quite fascinating to me. BBC did a survey that said across the board, people will take a pay cut to work for a company that aligns with their values. But that's hard to do if you're not clear about what your values are, or if you're doing things that contradict those values. So you're sending a muddled kind of message. Gallup found that it takes more than a 20% pay increase to lure somebody away from a culture that they do identify with and feel like that they're part of and they're aligned with. And so what you have happening now with this Great Resignation is something we haven't seen since the end of Y2K. That was the last time. Same kind of thing. Crazy situation. People kind of hunker down. Life's too short. Maybe it's time to make a change once the coast was clear. And so it happens. The labor market does this. But it's interesting because organizations are starting to recognize that, wow, if we don't have people aligned with us, they're going to get picked off easy. But what if we're on the opposite side of that? What if we're the ones who are going, hey, this is who we clearly are, and people who actually align with those values then want to join your team? That's an employment brand thing. You can't snap your fingers and make it happen, but there are steps you can take to create the visibility to give you that employment brand to be able to recruit in this market and to make the Great Resignation actually work for you rather than against you.
Ooh. Interesting. Very interesting.
I mean, I agree that you really have to establish a brand. You really need to know that you know what the values and things are, and it's very important to put out that information in job descriptions. It's also important to put yourself out there as far as technology is concerned, because sometimes having people make those decisions are going to be, they're going to be biased. They're going to look for those personalities that are like theirs, and we're not really looking for personality. We're looking for a cultural ad. So I'm finding that a lot of my clients are breaking away from those personality assessments that they're using to make hires, because things like Myers-Briggs, and where we kind of put everybody in those quadrants, when we're hearing people that all fit into the same quadrant, we're getting a lot of the same feedback. We're not getting those differing ideas and things like that. So I think one of the big pieces is make sure that your technology works for you and not against you. I know that's definitely something we're seeing at HiringThing. We're seeing less personality assessments. We're seeing putting jobs out on a lot of different places to attract different candidates. And then we're also seeing a rise in and I just want to make sure I get the rubric-based scoring, which defines more what a role is and what things you're looking for within that role as far as skill set and talents, rather than looking at that personality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think both of those are great points. And it kind of leads to what you're seeing in terms of the technology. And I think to your point, Donna, having some of those assessments where you end up perpetuating a bias because you look at the one person's personality and replicate that is very real. And I wanted to see what kind of other technologies, both Mark, you've seen out there that you're working with organizations with, but also you, Donna, that helps you align instead of perpetuating things like biases, but also helps you convey culture, convey what you're looking for throughout that hiring process during the Great Resignation. Because there's a lot of noise out there, as you know, there's a lot of technologies, and there's not going to be a one size fits all. So I truly think each organization is going to have to figure out what fits with them. But what have you seen out there working with different organizations that have helped actually positively impact that culture instead of having the opposite effect to Mark's point earlier?
I'll jump in. So in that case, that would be using. A lot of people are using video. When we're here at Wedge, we're talking about that. They're using video as a way to really communicate that as their brand. They're using that to put it out there and not just, I'm putting some words on a page and this is who we are and this is what we're doing. But they're really trying to showcase that. They're using employee testimonies. They're really trying to grow referral programs, which is really where you're going to find those people that are speaking to things that you already have in place.
Right.
Through that, they're using a lot of social media to be able to show that, and obviously build on that, because when you are sharing through social media, you're hoping that someone else is going to share it and someone else is going to share it. And your ultimate goal is to keep rabbit holing down to all of these people that this one good employee knows. But if we're doing that appropriately, then the technology works for us. The other thing that people are doing is they're really trying to make sure the values are well stated, and it's not just the qualifications of the job. We're making sure we're really stating that when we're looking for it, that our company has that brand that's seen and is recognizable.
So I would add to that. So I use HiringThing as an ATS. I think it's way better to use a system like that as opposed to an email address, careers@Acme Inc. or whatever it may be. There's a sophistication that the person encounters in the application process. And it's really one of the first things that they get to see in terms of the employment brand. The ad is actually the first thing, the promotion, whatever you do with it. But in terms of how I operate or get my clients to, I don't post job descriptions. I think of a job description as comparable to a contract. Well, if you were going to send to attract a potential client, you wouldn't send them your contract. You'd send them a proposal. And it was something that's, probably shorter. It really highlights the points that are the values of the organization or the product that you're selling, and your value proposition, basically. And so I write ads that look like that are more of a proposal. The job description can come later. So that creates the visibility. Now, I also do ads kind of differently, because at the bottom of the ads I write, and by the way, I write them for marketing companies too, but at the bottom, I'll say this will not be the right opportunity for those who. And I'm using in that the things that don't work at that organization, because I'd rather be crystal clear. Now, that
Right.
in the face of the conventional recruiting model, which says throw the net out wide and attract everybody and make it look like you're the best place to work ever. I'd rather be blunt level honest and say you won't like it if you're looking for this. So, for instance, I have a client that is a software company, very fast growing, about 500 people around the world. And I'm real clear that if you would like to work at certain types of software companies where you might have your own cubicle and be able to have a headset on and code, you'd hate this, because it's totally open architecture. There's no privacy. Everybody's in pods, even the CEO. And there's a lot of constant interruption and groupthink and things such as that. So if you like some peace and quiet, you'd hate it, and you'd feel like it was just chaos. But if you like it, it's the best. And so I make ads that look like that. But then that next step is, how do they apply? What do they see when they do? So, for instance, within HiringThing, not only does the process look sophisticated, not only does it look like the client, because it has their logo, their colors, etc., but you can actually ask. I think, Donna, it's an unlimited number of questions on HiringThings. Some ATSs give you 5. Well, I've got more questions than that I want right at the start. And so I might ask 7 or 8 questions in that process, but the way I'm asking them is in the language of the company. And the things that I'm getting after are things that sound like them. And I usually throw a fun one in there too. And it could be anything from, of the 5 values on our website, which is your favorite? I'm driving them back to the client's website. In one particular case, I work with a brewery that makes 120 new brews a year. And so I asked them, what's your favorite beer outside of that? And if you don't have one, just pick a drink, whatever it is. You don't have to be a beer drinker. I make it kind of clear, but I want to see a little bit about how engaged they will be in the process as well. I don't really care what the answer is. I want engagement. And so I use HiringThing that way. But then I also use Wedge, because you can use it different ways. I know with Wedge, you can send out the video interviews en masse to every single person who applies. We do it just selectively to the ones that we're interested in based on paper. But then we're recording, either I do this or somebody who works for me does, we're recording the questions ourselves. So they're actually seeing us face to face, but we're telling them, hey, if you engage in this process, it's a way better way to present your qualifications than a piece of paper is. And so you'll get a chance to get to see us, and we'll see you. There'll be a little bit of an interaction, even though it's separated by time. So it's kind of that next step to, again, reinforce the culture. But every single step of that, in my mind, should say the same message. And so the fun thing with HiringThing, you can make it really simple, you can make it really complex. And so if it's the kind of organization that is very detail and structure oriented, then I want the process to look that way, because it says the same thing. If it's a place that moves fast and just hits it, and we don't want a lot of details, then I want the process to look the same. I don't want to contradict it by what the candidate is seeing, because they're shaping their view of the employment brand by that process. And then every other step of it needs to be the same way, whether it's what do you do next for the interview, homework, whatever kinds of assessments you use. The other thing I'd say is I have a tool that I've developed that's not a personality test. I've been certified in numerous ones of them over the years. I'm sure Donna has too. I think there's over 1,000 marketed now in America, which is crazy. The value to me is that at least people have a kind of similar framework in terms of a common language, but I don't actually recommend any of them. I'll use them if clients are using them, because if it's their language, great. And if they know what an Enneagram 9 is, more power to them. But I have an assessment, or an exercise, I should say, that's based on values preference related to culture. And it's like culture clarification for values. So they're all good, but I'm really trying to identify what are the top drivers that they want in a workplace. And then what are the things they don't care anything about? If there's decent alignment there in terms of what they want from the workplace compared to what the workplace is, then it helps a lot. But if there's not, and we're off a little bit, then it helps frame a discussion. And so the issue that I was mentioning earlier, if there's a difference, then I can tell both sides of that, be sure you understand this. Be sure you've got clear expectations about the pace at which the organization will expect the job to be performed at. And so I actually use it for career coaching, which I do as a give back. I use it in leadership development teams because I'm really trying to get that culture definition down. What is important, what's not.
100%. I think a consistent approach is super important, and an approach and process that reflects that company's culture or what that role is going to be about is crucial, and will impact things like turnover, so they really know what they're getting into and level setting.
And by the way, with Wedge, if I can, that fun part about being able to record the actual video that they see and then respond to. And by the way, I used to use a competitor product, which was fine. That was my first introduction to video interviewing, but it didn't allow that. You just had a screen and it had a sentence, and then you got to answer the question. But if you think about it, if you're a CPA firm and you want to attract CPAs, then there's probably a certain language and way that you would share that might be different from a software developer, or might be different from a microbrewery or whatever. And so the personality of I don't mean the individual personality, and the kind of flavor, if you will, of the company comes across in that video interview that direction as well. So it's a two-way street, and that's, to me, what's so valuable with it.
For sure. I would say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, before the whole COVID era, you could probably get away with sending those text-based questions and they can do it on their own. But now more than ever, a branded video goes a long way, or a level set, or them seeing their boss or anyone that maybe they're about to work with saying, hey, I've been here for 5 years. A testimonial, I think, is super impactful throughout the candidate experience.
You bet.
Now, I think in terms, just our last question I wanted to touch on is candidate experience, how important it is today, and really how you can intertwine. And I think we've touched on it throughout, quite frankly, but how can you stay consistent with a good candidate experience, both with video, but also with HiringThing? Because once again, it's a candidates market that we find ourselves in, and how can we stay really consistent with the brand, but also make sure that it's a great experience. And I think it starts with consistency, but there's also a number of things organizations are doing now to set out and differentiate from competitors, instead of just a regular apply and then you put in your information for the 6th time and then they drop off. I think I've read a stat that after pressing apply, 93% of people drop off after that. Like, that is a wild stat. How is that even possible? And I'm sure that will fluctuate from industry to industry, but how can we make it a better process for that candidate, whether it's mobile? But would love to just get your 2 cents on that as a kind of the last question, because I think candidate experience is an important pillar in all of this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is one of the things that we're consistently looking at as an ATS company. Obviously, we're finding that more and more smaller companies are adopting ATSs now. It used to be a thing of the past 5 or 6 years ago that you have these really huge companies that really are concerned about having the consistent hiring process. And the smaller companies were just happy to manage it themselves. But now consistency is important to your applicant. The applicant needs to have that confirmation. They want to know what's going on. They're applying for more jobs than they ever have. So you really want to grab them at some point and make sure you're continuing to communicate with them along the way, that you're kind of showing up in several places. You're allowing them to understand your professional organization, and this is what you stand for, and this is what you want to see in your employees, and this is what we want to attract, and we really want you. Whereas a lot of times these days, if you're not being communicative with them and you're not giving them that consistency, they're assuming they're just another cog in the wheel. And they're really not interested in that anymore. They're interested in, I want to get as many applications in as I can, but I also want to get quality applications in and be a quality candidate for someone. So that's where ATS has really come into play, because you can completely customize everything that you do within the hiring process. You can make sure that you're viewing your applicants, consistently in the same way, that you're eliminating bias, that you're allowing management to come in and also be involved in that consistently, as well as other employees. So yeah, that is a huge thing that we deal with all the time.
Yeah. And I would add, communication has changed in the last 20 years. Before texts and tweets, which isn't that long ago, we communicated by giving each party a diatribe of information. That's what happened before there were such things that limited numbers of characters. And so organizations got really good at posting a 4 or 5 page job description, just inundating the candidate with a whole lot. And then the candidate would send back, a CV or something of numerous pages and a list of references and just a whole lot of stuff. And that was what you then decided who you're going to interview from, phone interview or whatever was the next step. So in my mind, rather than doing the information dumps, we've turned into a way of communicating where it's an iterative process that we build on. And so I use both of your platforms to do that. So I put out a posting. People are responding to that. I like what I see. I'm sending them a Wedge interview. I like what I see there. I have somebody reaching out to do a live Google Meet or Zoom type of meeting. We give them homework. We send it to the client. So it's back and forth, that iterative process. And to me, that staying in touch is really powerful right now, because you've seen the statistics of the number of people who ghost. Well, they ghost sometimes because they get a little in, like maybe your 93% figure, and then figure out this isn't really for me. Sometimes they ghost because they just don't know where they stand, and there's another offer because everybody else is looking for people too. So that ability to use the technology that both of your organizations bring helps create that iterative process where you're staying in touch. And I just think that's gonna sort out the candidates who really want to stay engaged and who are engaged from those who are just massively applying for jobs and going to Indeed and clicking a button. So I think you facilitate that, especially with the two organizations together.
For sure. I think we may have shot ourselves in the foot creating a one-click apply.
Oh, I agree.
A lot of that, and has created a sea of applicants that aren't a good fit because they didn't read the job description, to your point, because it's way too long and boring, and they probably just copied it from a competitor. And you need to find a way to pinpoint those candidates better and build a relationship with them through communication, as opposed to just technology, to get the human element to it as well. But you know what, Mark and Donna, I really appreciate it. I think we're getting close to time here. I did want to leave the very last bit. Let them know, or let the audience know, where they can learn more from HiringThing or Open Door, where they can connect with you on LinkedIn. Any information around that would be great. And once again, we really appreciate being part of the Wedge TV series here on WedgeChatter.
Absolutely. You can find us at www.hiringthing.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn. You can look up my name on LinkedIn in the business development department, or you can search HiringThing and find us, and you will definitely find us, and we'll be there for you.
Yeah. And my website's opendoorculture.com. If anybody wants to chat, I use Calendly, and it's just calendly.com/opendoor. And however that works, super happy to help.
Perfect. Thanks, you two. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.